There's a general consensus among us, I think, that there's concern about the future of local associations and how they operate, the effectiveness. And a question that we hear quite often is, why should I be part of a local association? What's the use? Is there really any benefit to it for me? That question, is there anything a benefit for me, is probably a question that we really wouldn't want our church members to ask, but yet pastors will ask that question. Why should I go to a local association? What have they done for me? And that sort of thing. And so there's this concern. And I wonder, can we make a correlation, or can we make an association, can we make a distinction, a correlation between the health of the local association or the decline in the number of local churches? For example, in Missouri over the last 12, 13 years, we have closed, or at least 25 churches have disassociated. Many have closed and some have disassociated over the last 12 years. Can we make a correlation between the decline in the number of local churches that are affiliated with our associations or with our states or with the denomination and the decline in the interest in local association meetings? And I think there may be a correlation there. If so, if that's the case, what are going to be the steps to get out of that decline? What can we do? Now, what we're going to look at this afternoon is, one, where did local associations come from? Who came up with this idea of quarterly meetings? We're going to look a little bit at the leadership of Benjamin Randall. We're going to look at the motives behind why they decided to have local associations. And we'll look at some passages of Scripture regarding the need or the biblical perspective of working together in association. And then we will just look at some other informations and perhaps testimonials of what is taking place in some local associations. On October 17th, 1783, or October 1783, Benjamin Randall met together with some other leaders in Hollis, Maine. And all of this that I'm going to share regarding the early beginnings, I found in a book called History of Free Will Baptist that Brother David Crow, NAM, gave to several of us years ago. And they may still have a few copies of this, the early history of our denomination, especially or in particular in the northeast part of our country. But in this meeting, there were like-minded people who came together, and there were several who preached. And in the book, the author says that they came together, those who preached a free and full salvation. Now, to us, that we understand what they're talking about. Free salvation means that everyone is a candidate for it, and a full salvation is that it embraces or it covers the entire human race. And that in distinction to what would have been perhaps the most prevalent group at that time, the Calvinist. And so they came together because they wanted to meet with those who were like-minded in their doctrine and in their theological positions. That was in October. Then on Saturday, December the 6th, they came together and they met to discuss the forming of an association. Now I want you to notice this is Saturday, and they're talking about this. Should we and can we come together as a body with a doctrine that is very, very similar, and we preach the same salvation for everyone? Should we come together as a group and form a body. They did not meet on Sunday, December the 7th, because it was the Lord's Day. So they took that day off, and then they came together again on Monday, the 8th of December, and they voted to organize formally and meet each quarter of the year, thus calling the meetings quarterly meetings. That's profound, isn't it? Now, something interesting, in the 1700s, they didn't drive SUVs. And so for them to go from Hollis, Maine to Gloucester, Maine, to other places in Maine, although it may have only been a distance of 90 to 100 miles or an hour and a half to 2 hours, they would either have to travel by train or some other means of transportation. So for them to go a very short distance, in our thinking, would have required a great deal of effort. But they saw that this was worth it. And so as they dealt with this and they voted to have the association to come together, they determined that they needed to answer the question, why form an association? Why should we do this? What's the need for this? What's the use? And they found that they wanted to have an organized bond of union. In other words, I want to join with those that are of like faith, those that are of like doctrine. We've got a lot in common, so let's join together. They wanted to also form some type of accountability with each other. That is, I need you to ask me questions, and I need to ask you questions, and we need to answer those questions honestly. Accountability among the ministers. Then also there was the need for instruction, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. In this history book that I just mentioned, chapter 3, I'd like to read a quote that's there. They had found, too, that the churches needed some organized bond of union, some authorized body to look after their interest, and some appropriate tribunal for counsel and appeal. And it was believed also that some combined effort for the worship of God and the salvation of souls would be blessed by the great head of the church. There's a lot in that paragraph. They needed an organized bond of union. That is, while being self-governed, each local church, or autonomous, as we would call that, such autonomy did not mean independent. Rather, it would be considered interdependent. And so we need to ask ourselves the question in this day regarding that, what is autonomy and what is it not? Perhaps a good exercise for us at a future date would be to define what autonomy means and what it does not mean. But there was a desire on their part at that time to avoid the independent mindset and join together as members of the body of Christ in a local association. They wanted accountability. That is, according to what they said in their documents, some organized body to look after their interests. That is, they saw that they needed someone to ask why, how, when, who, and what. It was necessary to be ready and prepared to answer the difficult questions regarding the local church and their ministry as individuals. And asking those questions was not motivated by a desire for control or dominance or ownership, but rather they were motivated by a genuine sense of the need to edify each other. And that requires trust. That requires humility. And so while this is difficult for us sometimes to answer those questions to a body of peers, it's really healthy and it's really necessary. And our forefathers saw that. And that's one of the reasons they decided to come together, to have an organized body to look after their interests. Then there was instruction involved in this. They needed some appropriate tribunal, that is, I hate to use the word, a committee, or a board, or a body for counsel and appeal. So they would give instruction, they would give advice, there would be mentoring that would take place, there was wisdom there, there was an appropriate tribunal that would deal with difficulties and the instruction of each other. For example, one in one area might be dealing with the issues that would be brought up by a Calvinist brother down the road. This is what they're putting out at me. How can I deal with this? And then this group of peers would be able to help them to work through that. And then another area that they saw a great need in was that they felt that God would be well pleased as they had a combined effort for worship and the salvation of souls, that would be pleasing to God. So they saw the need for evangelism. They felt like God would bless them if they did that. We can put that under the heading, if you want, of missions efforts. They wanted to come together to reach souls for Christ. And so we see some of the ingredients here of the local association in the very beginning. Back in the 1700s, they shared labors, they shared their trials, they taught scriptures, they worshiped. And so eventually, as they talked about this, they determined to form associations. What were the objectives of that? What would they attempt to achieve as they met? How many of us have heard, I would go to the association's meetings if anything was happening, if they would accomplish something. And we can kick back against that, but at the same time, we have to ask ourselves honestly, is there some truth in that question? Is there some legitimacy in that question? So the objectives that they found that they wanted to accomplish, and all of this again is taken from the book, was to ascertain the state of the churches. Ascertain the state of the churches. Now, what does that sound like to you? Brother Moody, Dr. Moody, talked about assessments and that sort of thing. If we're going to ascertain the state of the churches, we first of all have to know what the state of the church is. That means someone is going to report. And so they would come together and they would report some type of information, and then there would be a comparison, evidently, logically, of this state at one point and this state at another point, and then they would ascertain what is the spiritual health of that congregation. Boy, that'd be a tough one, wouldn't it? To have a bunch of preachers telling me and looking at the reports from my church and then asking me and telling me and giving me information about the health of what's going on in my local congregation. That's a tough one. But again, there's great accountability. So they would ascertain the state of the church. Now, do you remember when Paul told Titus to go to Crete? What did Paul tell him to do? To put in order the things that are lacking. How would you know what's lacking if you didn't do an assessment? If you're not taking a measuring stick and measuring some things, you wouldn't know whether something was lacking or whether there was an abundance. And so what we're seeing there from Paul to Titus is you need to go in and you need to make an assessment of the spiritual vitality of this congregation. And when you find the deficits there, you need to shore those areas up. Revelation chapter 2, Jesus told the church in Ephesus to remember from where they'd fallen. How would they know from where they'd fallen if they didn't take an assessment of where they were? And so the idea of assessment again in Revelation chapter 2. Chapter 3, verse 2 of Revelation, The church is told to strengthen what remains and are ready to die, to remember. That is, look back and see where you were and see where you are, and then see what needs to be corrected, what attitudes need to be changed, what sins need to be repented of, what changes might need to come. So all of this for us in our context infers, and for them as well, all of this infers reporting. Without accurate and honest reporting, how can we ascertain the state of the church? If we don't know how many we had in Sunday school 5 years ago or 10 years ago, how can we know how we're doing now? So as our state clerks and our national clerks and all of our organizations are asking for information, it's not just so that we can put numbers in a spreadsheet. It's so that at some point, if we want to look back and see from where we've come and to where we're going, we have something to compare to. And so accurate reporting is absolutely important for us. They also wanted to discuss the interest of religion, or I term that the spiritual climate. The interest of religion in their people and their community, their congregation. Can we, as a group of peers, talk about the spiritual climate in your church, in your local association? Could we talk about how spiritual your services are, or how spiritual your people are? That was one of the things they wanted to do, was discuss the spiritual climate, the spiritual vitality. And then they would adjust difficulties. Some of the language here is kind of humorous. One of the paragraphs there, the quarterly meetings early became a biblical school where investigation of intricate text and doctrinal questions were successfully prosecuted. I don't know that, maybe I have. I don't know that I've ever prosecuted a doctrinal question, but that's one of the things that they did. And I think by that what they mean is that when there was opposition, when there were difficulties, when there were doctrinal issues, when there were personalities in conflict, as we see in the book of Timothy, that they would talk about that. And as an association, they would help a local pastor to deal with some of these things. And they would give advice, and they would counsel. And so the association wasn't just coming together and singing 3 songs and having somebody preach about how horrible it is in Washington and then eating a meal. They were actually dealing with some of the issues that needed to be dealt with in the local churches. So they would adjust those difficulties. And when the word adjust is used there, I'm wondering if they meant that they would actually deal with those that were causing division or problems. If some pastor was getting crossways with his people without the need to get crossways, if they would reprimand him or reprove him or encourage him to not do that. Or if a deacon got out of sorts and was being divisive, or if there was someone that was gossiping and doing harm to the church, if they would adjust that situation as an association. They would deal with those who were deceivers, those who were problem makers, and possibly call in a neutral person to help to deal with it. And there were more objectives. They would examine candidates for ordination for the ministry, and they would ordain them if they found it advisable. As a denomination, I think we need to do some serious work in this area, and including accountability of the already ordained. In preparation for the ministry, and as they looked at examining candidates, we all know that education does not make the minister. We're aware of that. It's the Holy Spirit that makes the man. And a minister is nothing more nor less than anyone else because of the abundance or for the lack of formal education or preparation. And we understand that not everyone has the opportunity nor the circumstances to attend a seminary or a Bible college. We understand that. But, and I will say this across the line in our denomination, with online courses, with seminars, with podcasts, and thousands of resources available, it's inexcusable for a minister to not take advantage of those in our day. It's inexcusable for our young men going into the ministry to not get as much preparation as they possibly can. So they dealt with the ordination of the candidates. And a man called of God into the ministry should desire to do all he can to be as prepared as possible in every or any area of life arena in life where he might find himself. Then, not only dealing with the ordination, they would examine candidates, but they would also worship and observe the ordinances. They came together for the preaching, the praying, the singing, and the preaching of God's Word. This was a serious investment of time on their part, as I have said. It would take hours for them to get from one place to the other. So a quarterly meeting wasn't a 30-minute drive down the road for them. Sometimes it would be 2 or 3 days. And there's just quite a difference in what was the mentality then and mentality now. And we understand we're living in different centuries. We understand that, schedules and that sort of thing. And in many of our associations, not to be critical, just as an observation, we have sometimes way too long business sessions. You state guys that visit your quarterly meetings, some interesting things happen, don't they? In one association, you go and the moderator welcomes everyone, says hello, thanks for coming, we're glad you're here, appreciate you taking your time to be here. If you're a standing delegate, you know who you are. If you're not a standing delegate, you're a elected delegate from your church, would you please stand? And so they all stand. And can we have a motion to seat the delegates? Somebody makes the motion. Do we have a second? Okay, everybody that is in favor of that say aye, and they all say aye, and they sit down. Well, now we've got the delegates seated, but we don't have any business to take care of, so does anyone want to make a motion we adjourn? That happens. And sometimes we just need to take a step back and realize we probably need to do some preparation for our moderators, some education, some training for our clerks and things like that. One association I was in, they had 37 points that they have to deal with every time they meet. They meet once a year. And there are 2 churches in this association, by the way. They got a lot of business. And, they're going along, and the moderator's there, and he's got his pencil, and we're down to number 17. We need to choose the speaker for the 11 o'clock session. It's 10:45. And they look at me, or they look at one guy here in the front, and they say, could you do it? Well, I'd prefer not to. And then they look at me, Brother Stan, can you do that? Yeah, I can do that. I've got 15 minutes. And how many of you carry an outline in your Bible? I know you do if you're a preacher, or you got one in your head or somewhere in the fly leaf of your Bible. Well, we go through that. And then they get down to about number 23, and they're going to have the committee for good standing. So they look around, who can serve on that? Can you? No. Can you? No. Brother Stan, can you serve on that? I don't even know these people. So we go back and we hear the reports, and they're in good standing. I'm guilty. And we go back, and then they need a member for the general board. And can you do that? Well, if I don't have to do anything, I think I could. Okay, everybody in favor of him being on the general board, they voted him in. And that sounds silly, but it happens. I mean, I'm there. It's a first person. I'm there. Now, not all of our associations like that. We've got some that are just really, 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 really good. But I think it's repeated over and over and over again across our denomination, things like that. And so we're talking about making a serious investment of time for people. And if they don't see value in it, and if they don't see that it's worth their time, they're not going to go. They're just not going to do it. And so many times our business sessions are way too long. Just because Aunt Sally's here and she wrote 13 songs doesn't mean she needs to sing 12 of them. And so we can do an assessment of our associations and probably improve that. Also, they said that it became a school where investigation of intricate text word and doctrinal questions were successfully prosecuted. The early meetings were more than a handshake, a song, and a meal. This comment infers that there was dialogue and the sharing of information. And I ask us, can we discuss doctrinal questions and intricate text among ourselves without fear, without threat, without name-calling, and without suspicion? They were dealing with intricate texts. I've got some questions about Calvinism. This is what they were telling me the other day. Now, can you guys help me out here? Somebody's being very honest, and we're not going to think about him that he's probably considering going Calvinist. We're thinking he's got somebody that's dealing with him and that's having some influence on him, and we need to help. And so, can we do that? A dear brother in Missouri said to me, we don't agree on everything with each other, but we can respect each other and have good fellowship. I agree. So regarding doctrinal questions and intricate text, historically, rather than dealing with the issues or the text and coming to some type of resolution or agreement, our churches or our associations as well, have a tendency to split, divide, and not resolve the issues. So association meetings can be an excellent opportunity to deal with difficult social and moral issues. What would be the idea? What would be the positive side of your local association bringing in someone that could deal with gender identity? Because every one of our churches are dealing with it in one way or the other, through our grandkids or through someone we know or some of their friends. Could we bring someone into our local associations where they might speak to a dozen church leaders about the effects of pornography? Just a few months ago, I was in a Christian school speaking to a group of middle schoolers and high schoolers. And after the session, we were talking about several things. After the session, a young man came to me and asked me, in a Christian school, in a strong Christian school, could I talk to you? And sure. He said, I've got some things I just want you to pray about. And he started talking, and you could tell that he just wasn't comfortable. And I said, are you talking about pornography? He said, yes. Me and another student here have been delving into that. We need to learn to talk about it and to deal with it. And there's great opportunity when we have a bunch of our church leaders together in an association, and that is time that is well invested when we deal with those issues. Or sexual promiscuity. Or what about helping grandparents when they become the primary caregivers for their grandchildren? Or how to deal with aging parents when Alzheimer's sets in and we don't know what to do and they don't have the finances perhaps to go to an institution. How can we deal with that? So there are a number of issues and topics that we can deal with in our associations, and we can hit a great number of people and congregations through that. The modern day Free Will Baptist associations, in our treaties, the Free Will Baptist churches, while independent, do not practice isolation. This is our treaties. They form associations with one another in several levels of organization described in this chapter. It's to be remembered, however, that these associations are voluntary, both at the beginning and in their continuation. The local church remains at liberty to withdraw from the association it has voluntarily joined. And so, we have agreed to not practice isolation. As a minister, I have agreed to that if I'm an ordained minister. I will not take my church and go off on my own. I will work together with others. Then also, the covenant says we will not forsake the assembling of ourselves together for church conferences, or as we would say, association meetings. Across our denomination, we have a great variety of ways that people meet. Some meet on Friday and Saturday. Some meet just on Friday night. Some meet on Saturday morning. Some meet on Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. Some meet on Saturday night. Some meet on Sunday afternoon. Some meet on Sunday night. I don't know how it might be in your state, but all of these are opportunities that we have to do better, to assess what's going on and determine that we can be more effective and we can make better use of the time that we come together and we can help each other. In the book of Colossians, chapter 4, verses 16 and 17, Paul told the Colossians to read the letter that he sent to them and then send it to the church in Laodicea, and then also to read the letter that he sent to the church in Laodicea in Colossians. That infers that there was a pretty strong connection between those two churches, that there was communication taking place there. And so, here in this room, not many, if any, of our churches here could support a full-time missionary on the field. But through working together in association and in cooperation, when we work together, we can accomplish a lot. And so that's one of the benefits of working as an association. We accomplish more together than we would apart. Went the wrong way. I read an article, and if you'd like a copy of it, you can get it online, or I can get you a copy of it. There's just not a lot of information out among us on the state of our associations as far as numbers and questionnaires and things like that. And so I did some research, and I found several articles by various pastors in the Southern Baptist Convention. They're probably the closest in organization and polity than anyone else to Free Will Baptist, and they did a study of their associations not too long ago. Jason Lowe, the director of missions in the Pike Association of Southern Baptists, I think it's in Florida, did the study, and they asked a bunch of questions. But one of the questions they asked is this: what's the most exciting aspect of the local association? That's a good question, isn't it? What do you like most about it? The number one answer, now that's Southern Baptist. That's not us. Lunch, the potluck, Free Meal Baptist. But they found that there was a perception that people had, and the reality, their perception and their reality were very different. And what they found is that people wanted to be involved in church planting, they wanted to be involved in counseling services, they wanted to be involved in disaster relief, they wanted to be involved in fellowshipping and networking, they wanted to be involved in leadership development, they wanted to be involved in local evangelism and in community engagement, men's ministries, mission trip plannings, and others, and then also help on pastoral search committees, stewardship resources, women's ministry, and all of these. And it sounds like a lot of what we've been talking about this week. That our needs and our desires are pretty much in line with what they found among Southern Baptists. They also asked another question, and that was, what's the most frustrating aspect of the local association? And the number one answer was that it was irrelevant. There's not much happening, and I go there and I may come away discouraged. And this sounds like I'm being really negative. I probably am, but it may be our reality, but we can fix it. We can fix it. Then they also said that the second thing that they found, and this is particularly true among the younger sect of their denomination, and that is they found that there was a lack of strategy, vision, or purpose. In other words, if we believe and we see that there's a strategy in this thing, there's a vision that is being cast, and there is a purpose to this, we're all in. But if we're just going to come together and to do what we've always done, and there's really not any vision of going forward, then we're not going to invest our time in that. And I would say that their insights and their questions would closely mirror what's happening in our denomination. I would say that we're pretty much in line with that. In this, they also found that 1/3 of the church leaders did not perceive their local association as valuable to their church. In other words, our church is not getting anything out of this. Do you think? I've been kind of taking note of the association meetings I go to. This is pretty much spot on, that there's almost always at least 1/3 of the church leaders, if there are 9 churches in the association, there'll be 6 represented, and 1/3 of them won't be, if not more. But it's pretty much along the line with where we are as Free Will Baptist, that a pretty sizable portion of our churches are not going to be involved. Now, what we do see is the larger the association, larger the number of churches, that there is less involvement. When there is a smaller association, there is more involvement of those churches in that. And so, if this is the perception that we say that could reflect fairly well who we are, the question would be, who can change that perception? Pastors influence their congregation, actively or passively. The individual pastor's perceived value of the local association influences their own and the congregation's level of involvement and interest. In other words, if the pastor doesn't see this as something that is worth giving our time for, the congregation much less is going to want to be involved. So those who can change this are the leaders. That's us. We're the ones that are accountable to see this move forward positively, if indeed we believe that it can be done and needs to be done and should be done. Another interesting thing is that in this, congregations have a strong desire to partner together with other churches to fulfill the Great Commission. In other words, when they asked the people in the churches, what would you like to do? They said, we want to be involved in church planting. We want to be involved in supporting missions. We want to be involved in reaching out. We want to fulfill the Great Commission, and we would like to come alongside others to do the same thing. That's the congregations. So again, we're finding within the people in the pew, there's this strong desire to come together, to cooperate together, to work together, but there needs to be leadership in that. Believers in your church and the church I attend want to be part of something bigger than and beyond themselves. Now, that's especially true of millennials and younger couples. They want to be involved in something beyond the four walls of our church. That's what with all of that being said, there was a couple of other things that were interesting that they found. One, church leaders, in light of everything that we've said now, the church leaders that were questioned still believe that associations can be effective. They believed in working together. They believed in associating. They believed in accountability. They believed in all of the things that we've talked about. However, there is a caveat to that. And that is if significant changes are made. We can't do the status quo and expect things to go forward. We need to make some changes. And so, further in the investigation, they asked, well, what do you want to see in association? The people responded, we want a cooperative local evangelism. That is, we want to work together with the churches around us in reaching souls in our community. We want to be involved in reaching our county. We want to be involved in reaching our state. We want to be involved in missions. Right now, the association quarterly is not doing this, but we believe that it's worth moving forward if we can make a few changes. They also saw the need and wanted to be involved in community engagement strategies, as we heard this morning. Interesting that what was said this morning aligns with this very well. And then they wanted to be in local church planting strategies, and we might add to that church revitalization or church renewal, adoption, or fostering of local churches. Now, what do you notice about these three things that people said, we would like to be involved in this through our local association? This is what people in congregation said. What do you notice about these three things? Pardon? It's where they live. But every one of these deals with reaching lost souls. Every one of them. That's what people in the congregation said. And so, in essence, saying it without saying it, they're saying we need someone to lead us and to challenge us and to help us to grasp a vision of accomplishing these things. That can come through the local association. They wanted also a world mission strategy. They wanted local church planting strategies and communications and networking with like-minded servants. That is, who around us has the same heartbeat? Who can we communicate with around us that can help us and give us some ideas and to help us to sharpen our tools as we go forward? Networking. So, when we come to leadership development strategy, the preparation for the ministry, the National Association offers a lot of opportunities to help us to develop leadership, many things. Many of our pastors are not aware of everything that's out there, all of the tools available for leadership developments. And good leaders inform others. And so it's upon us to inform the people in our states and our associations of what opportunities are out there that our local state association or the local or the national association may offer. So let's give our churches and our associations their money's worth. Jason Lowe in this quoted something. The research shows that these elements are what church leaders are saying and what they want their associations to provide. If associational leaders want to increase the perceived value, kingdom impact, and church involvement, we would be wise to listen. So, all of that being said, the history of associations, where they came from, what they've become, some of the needs. What are some ideas and suggestions? One, what we can do is pray for a catalyst or someone to move the ball downfield. Someone in local churches and local associations to take up the mantle and move us forward. Who in your area, your local association, could do that? Secondly, establish associational goals and a vision. In Missouri, we have challenged every one of our associations to have a missions conference. Every association. We don't have full buy-in, but we are gaining traction, and we're seeing more people get involved in that. Several things that we're encouraging our associations to do. The Mission Association, there's Justin there. Their association has done some things on D6 training. Brother Ron Hunter came in, did some training, and Brother Brad Ransom came in from NAM and worked with them. They brought some guys in to work with them and to talk with all of their churches about dealing and working with senior adults or retirees. They had some fellows come in from a recovery ministry to talk to them about various things. And over the last several years, they've varied the activities and the topics that are being dealt with that would be of help to the people in their association. And other associations are doing the same thing. And we're thankful for that. One thing that would be very good would be to bring someone in or have someone there local who could train associational officers. Many of our moderators have a real need for training, for someone to help them to know how to deal with that, or the clerks. And so we can train them. Having teacher training, Sunday school teachers, helping Sunday school teachers to know how to put together a Sunday school class and teach it effectively. D6 can help you with that. Bring them in. Child Evangelism Fellowship will come in and work with your church on helping you to reach children. In an association, that would be a great thing, because I hear over and over and over again, we don't have any kids in our church. Well, we can change that if we will get some preparation and prepared to get a few children. IM and NAM offer missions conferences and opportunities to learn about that. This year, we've had grandparenting classes in Missouri, helping senior adults to deal with raising their grandchildren. Justin at Mountain Grove did the KYC, Know Your Community. The number one age group in their community, what would you think it is? This is a rural community in the middle of Missouri. 4-year-old girls. The number one demographic is 4-year-old girls. Now, what does that tell you? Lots of kids. 4-year-old girls normally have 4 little brothers or big brothers. But it also tells us that somewhere there's grandmas and grandpas nearby. And what they find is that many times the mothers are displaced. The mother may be in Springfield, she may be in jail, she may be living in some other part of the city. She may be strung out on drugs. We don't know. And the grandparents are not the traditional grandparents that most of us would think of as grandparents. Grandma and grandpa come in, and Justin, they found that these are not, grandmas that have their house heated up to 75 degrees. These are very different. And so grandparenting classes and helping churches to know how to deal with this and celebrate recovery, greeter and usher training in association meetings, deacon training, hermeneutics classes on just how to interpret the Bible. And then let me step into an area here. Expect, if not require, accountability of pastors and churches in reporting. Again, referring to Brother Lawson, was moderator in the Mission Association nearly 9 years. And in that 9 years, he filled out, signed cards of good standing for ministers. And at least 6 or 7 of those he never met in the 9 years that he was moderator. But yet local churches sent them as ministers in good standing. But they never came to anything in 9 years. We can do better than that, can't we? Can't we expect ordained ministers and licensed ministers to report? To at least let us know where they're at? And is there something we can help them with? Is there an area in your life that we can pray with you about? Can we help you to get some preparation? How can we encourage you? Not because we want to penalize them, but because we want to help them, to minister to them so that they can be more effective. An association can do that. The intent is to help. And in our preaching at meetings, I've heard so much about how horrible D.C. is and how Hollywood, and I think I know where I stand about abortion. But in many of our meetings, we're preaching to the crowd that's not there. We probably don't need to hear among us another sermon on abortion or on the wickedness of this administration. But we do need to have someone show us how to win souls and to give us some tools to know how to pray. And so we use our time valuably. We evaluate on a regular basis. We promote and attend in a regular leadership prayer meetings where pastors may come together in a local association once a month and pray, actually pray, not just eat a breakfast and a 30-second prayer, but to actually pray and pray for one another. And then when it comes to our local associations, if we're going to do this, it's going to take leadership, and it's going to take someone taking up the mantle and having a burden to do this. And that's going to boil down, I think, to 2 things. One is empowering our leadership to lead us, and then trusting them to do it. Trusting them to take us forward. And so we can pray for our associations. We can improve our associations. We can come up with ideas and ways that we may need to change our scheduling. We may need to go from 4 times a year to 2 times a year, or whatever we may need to do. But we can take advantage of the opportunity to bring our churches together, bring our leaders together, and help to equip us to be more effective. I'm not ready to trash can association meetings, but I do believe that we need to step back and maybe consider an overhaul. And that would probably be a good thing.